Okay, lads, how's it going? So in this video, we're gonna have a look at timber seasoning. Okay, so again, I'm just gonna try and get all the information from this topic down into one A3 sheet. Okay, if you have an A3 sheet at home, fantastic. If you don't, get two A4 sheets, put them side by side, and put a little bit of tape at the back of them. Okay, so with the timber seasoning, guys, all right, I'm just going to divide up the page a little bit. All right, so just here to left hand side to begin with, we're going to have a look at some of the lingo around timber seasoning. We're going to explain what timber seasoning is, and we're going to have a look at some of the words that's used with timber seasoning. Okay, I'm going to have kind of a narrow little section over here for that, and what's left over with the page, then I'm going to divide that up into four. Okay, so there's two different types of timber seasoning. There's natural and kiln, which we're going to go into, and I'm just going to label this here natural. So we're going to explore this a little bit more here. We're going to have a look at kiln seasoning down here. There are two types. Okay, there is some, I suppose we call it keywords or phrases that you need to know with timber seasoning that continuously come up in exams. Okay, and the last thing that we want to do is there's two types of seasoning. Okay, as we said, kiln and natural. Okay, we're going to compare both types, and the easiest way to do this, guys, I find anyway, is to do it in a table format. Okay, so we're going to look at natural first. Okay, we'll look at the advantages and we look at the disadvantages of natural. So advantages, disadvantages of natural, and we have kiln below. Okay, I left that a little bit tight now. Hopefully we get all the information in there. We have again advantages and disadvantages. Okay, just to begin with, guys, 1 second, I'll just darken these lines just to make sure it's all nice and clear in the camera. Okay, so just to begin with, okay, so timber seasoning, guys, is basically when a tree is cut down, it's at 50% moisture content. Okay, so when a tree is felled, it's at 50% moisture content. Okay, moisture content, guys, is like a measure of the amount of water that's in it. So if you're thinking of moisture content in, if we just take fruit, okay, if you're thinking of moisture content in a strawberry, it will be very high, an orange will be very high, and then obviously fruits like apples down to bananas, moisture content is reducing. So moisture content is basically the percentage of water in the tree when it's felled. Okay, so when a tree is growing, guys, or when it's live, it's roughly 50% moisture content, so it's 50% water. Okay. And timber seasoning is basically bringing it from 50% moisture content all the way down to 20% or below. Okay, preferably less. All right, it's 20% or below. So what we're looking to do, guys, is through timber seasoning, we're taking 30% of the moisture content out of it, and we're bringing it down to 20% or less. Okay, so just with this, guys, this 50%. Okay, when a tree is felled and when it's newly cut down. Okay, so newly felled timber. Is known as green timber. Okay, so this is called green timber. Okay, so this comes up in the short questions in the junior stuff sometimes. So when you think of green timber, you're thinking of newly felled timber, which is 50% moisture content roughly. Okay, so the reasons for making it, or the reasons for timber seasoning. Okay, so in woodwork, guys, there's a reason for doing everything, especially when you're doing something which is going to use up possibly a lot of electricity and a lot of machinery to try and get this timber down to 20% moisture content or less, we need reasons to do it. Okay, so the first thing is, if you leave something there long enough, it's going to dry. Okay, so timber will dry naturally. This is without seasoning. Okay, so if we were to compare this, guys, to when your clothes come out of a washing machine, right? So if you think of at home, when your clothes come out of a washing machine, they're a big ball. Okay, when they come out in a big ball, if you let them on your kitchen floor or your kitchen or your whatever dining room floor, eventually, if they're left there long enough, lads, eventually they're going to dry out. Okay, so you can imagine the outsides will dry first, and it'll take a long time, but eventually all the clothes inside there, they're eventually going to dry out. Okay, but when we think of timber seasoning, what we're doing in essence is we're firstly cutting up all the wood. Okay, so we're taking it from a trunk. When I was talking about the clothes coming out of the dryer, okay, what I'm talking about there is a big ball of clothes. That's basically our log. Okay, so if we cut a log and if we put it into a dry environment, which is sheltered and has no rain coming down it, eventually, guys, that log will dry out. How long it takes, God only knows. I don't know, it's going to take an awful long time. Okay, so that's your ball of clothes, and we'll say this is the clothes. Okay, what we're looking clothes in a ball. Okay, what we're looking to do is the way to speed up the drying out process, guys, is to catch your clothes and either put them into the dryer, which introduces heat. So heat will help it dry faster, or taking them, putting them outside in the clothesline and letting the air run through it. Okay, we're going to call that circulation of air. So there are your two options. Okay, when you're drying your clothes, you either put them into the dryer, that's to get heat, or else you put them outside and you let the air run through them. Okay, when we're thinking of a log, guys, we firstly need to chop up our timber into, we'll say this is true and true sawing, into planks, so that this is basically, guys, hanging our clothes out to dry. You're separating all the pieces from each other. That way, the air is going to run through it a lot easier. Okay, so you're making boards out of all these, and you're putting little sticks in between them so the air can move around there, and you either put it into warm air, or else you just put it outside, which is natural air circulation, and you let the air run through it. Okay, so that's kind of the theory behind timber seasoning, right? So if we come back here, the timber will dry naturally, all right? But obviously, guys, if you're looking for timber for construction, for furniture, or for a constant supply of timber, you want to speed that up, and you don't want to wait for a full log to dry out naturally. It might take 5 or 6 years, depending on where it is. Okay, so you chop it up using conversion, which we discussed previously. And once you have the conversion done, you then look at the different ways of seasoning. Okay, so the reasons for seasoning are, number one is it prevents diseases and defects. So the reason that we're looking to get this below 20% moisture content, okay, is if you ever see wood, guys, which is outside and it's soaked with water, you're going to see different types of rot. So wet and dry rot. Okay, so if the moisture content of the wood is below 20%, you're not going to get any diseases or very little defects also. Okay, so the wood is it's going to be a lot cleaner. There's going to be very little disease and defects in it. When you're using it for furniture, it's not going to shrink, or it's not going to distort, we call it. Okay, okay. And finally, guys, if you're working with wet timber, okay, if you're working with timber which is 50% moisture content, it's going to take a big toll on your tools. Okay, so you think of saws, if you think of chisels, all that, it's going to really put pressure on those when you're working with it. If you're sawing wet timber, it's very difficult to saw, very difficult to chisel, very difficult to do anything with it. So it makes it a lot more usable, or not a lot more workable. Okay, all the timber that we use in woodwork, guys, is timber that's dried down to roughly about 16-17% moisture content. And when it comes into the woodwork room, it dries down a little bit more on top of that again. Okay, so all that is, guys, is a few little reasons. There's obviously a lot more reasons as well, but they're the main ones, guys. As long as we get it below 20% moisture content, if we get it below 20% moisture content, it's not going to shrink, it's not going to distort, and it's going to be a lot easier to work with. So they're the three key ones that I suppose apply to us in woodwork. Okay, so they're the reasons that we get in wood, which is seasoned. Okay. So the next part here, guys, there is a few keywords or a few little phrases that you need to know when it comes to timber seasoning. Okay, so the first one is relative humidity. Okay, so just take your time going through these, guys, and take them down nice and clearly. Okay, so relative humidity, guys, is basically there's always a certain amount of water vapor in the air. Okay, so you can't see it around you. Okay, so you can't see the water vapor around you. But I suppose if you were to breathe against the window and if you see evaporation happening on it and a little bit of water gathering around the inside of the window, that's basically what that is. Okay, so in the winter, lads, there's a lot more water vapor in the air. Okay, so an example, if we just go back to drying the clothes, in the winter, if there's no sun in the winter and if there's no sun in the summer, and if you're drying the clothes in a bad winter's day where it's just damp and humid, yet there's no rain, there's going to be a lot of moisture content. Okay, so there's lots of water in the winter, okay, in the air. If you're thinking of the summer, and if there's no sun out, guys, but you're drying your clothes, the air is a lot warmer and has a lot less moisture content. Okay, so if we're thinking about drying wood naturally, there's a lot less water vapor in the air in the summer. So the summer is going to be a much better time to dry your wood. Okay, so that's relative humidity. That's the first one. The second one is, we call it hydroscopic. Okay, so what I'm asking down there, guys, is a hydroscopic material. So wood is a hydroscopic material. Okay, so what hydroscopic means is it's affected by the changes in moisture content. Okay, so the really easy example for this, guys, is anyone that plays hurling. Okay, during the summer, if your hurley dries out, small little cracks might appear in it. The reason that the cracks come, or the reason that it dries out, is because there's a lot less moisture content in the air. Okay, so the wood dries out, and as it dries out, guys, it's going to shrink down a very small little bit. If it's below 20% moisture content, it's going to shrink down a very small little bit. If you catch your hurling, if you put it in a bucket of water, like the Boston bucket of water, it's going to soak that water up, and the wood is going to take on more moisture, and it's going to expand a little bit again. Okay, so it just balances it out. So what hydroscopic means is, if you get a piece of timber and if you let it sit in a bucket of water for, we'll say, a week, and when you put it into the bucket of water to start, it's 20% moisture content. When you come back, guys, that timber is going to be after absorbing a massive amount of water, and it'll be up at 30-40% moisture content. Okay, so wood is always going to react to the environment that it's in. All right, so it's going to go and gain more moisture content, or it's just going to lose moisture content. So if you think of your house, guys, the furniture inside your house, okay, so we're always looking to get below 20%, because 20% stops disease and defects. But if you were to use furniture in your house, okay, and if your house is always fairly warm, it's a modern enough house, the air inside there, guys, is going to have very little moisture content in it, okay, because it's a heated area. So the moisture content in furniture, which is, or in wood, which is used for furniture, is about 11 to 13%. Okay, so, and it's going to stay within that range. All right, so it's inside in a real dry area. There's never exposed to large humidity or water. It's going to kind of balance out at about 11 to 13%. Okay, so if we were to give a quick definition of a hydroscopic material, I'm just going to say that the wood will absorb and release moisture content in different environments. Okay, so again, guys, if the wood is in a really damp, humid area or climate, it's going to absorb loads of moisture, and if it absorbs moisture above 20% moisture content, then you're looking at a lot of diseases and defects which will affect it. If it's below 20%, it's safe from diseases and defects. But if you have material which is 20% moisture content and you go and you bring it inside and it eventually comes down to 11 or 13% moisture content, it's going to shrink a little bit and you're going to see little cracks in the wood. Okay, and that happens fairly often in kitchen tables and indoor furniture like that. When it dries out after maybe 6 months, you'll see little cracks appearing. Okay, so yeah, so the hygroscopic material, guys, is linked to the next one that we're going to talk about. Okay, and this again, guys, is something that comes up in the junior cert fairly often. It's usually described as EMC. Okay, so what EMC means is equilibrium moisture content. Okay, so equilibrium moisture content, guys, is just what we talked about. Okay, so it's basically absorbing moisture content and letting moisture content release. Okay, so a good example for this, guys, anyone that I suppose has a garage outside or has any sort of external door, is the door often swells. So outside doors, often swell in the winter and shrink in the summer. Okay, so if you think of equilibrium moisture content, if you just think of your outside door in your garage or anywhere outside, in the winter, guys, outside doors often stick, okay, because the wood takes on all that moisture in the air and it increases in size. So when you go to close the door, it'll often be getting stuck. The same door in the summer, it's going to be much warmer, less moisture content in the air, and the door will shrink as a result, and it won't be getting stuck. Okay, so look, they're just our keywords, guys. We need to know these phrases and just make sure you have a good note of them and make sure you understand them. Okay. So what we're going to do now, guys, is we're going to have a look at the two types of seasoning. Okay. So the first type of seasoning is natural air seasoning, and the second type of seasoning is called a Kiln air seasoning. Okay. So basically, the natural air seasoning is when you allow air to run and circulate through your boards, and eventually the boards will dry out themselves. Okay, we need to create an environment where there's not going to be any rain falling down top of the boards, where there's not going to be moisture from the ground going up through the boards, and where the air can properly circulate. Okay, so when we think of natural air seasoning, guys, and when it asks you to discuss it, you usually need to create a sketch to go with it. Okay, so just really quickly, I'm just going to sketch out something here for you. Okay, so if we say this is the ground here, it's usually, guys, kept up off of the ground. Okay, so I'm just going to put in something here. We'll just say this is outside and it's out in grass. Okay, with the natural air seasoning, guys, we're going to put blocks underneath timber. Okay, so that the timber is kept up off the ground. Obviously, because what we're talking about, because it is hygroscopic material, if we left this timber on the ground when it's drying out and we didn't keep it off the ground with blocks, timber is just going to absorb the moisture up from the ground and it's never going to dry fully. Okay, so we're just going to put 2 blocks there, guys, and that's going to keep our timber up off the ground. Once we've that done, just use some pen, we can start running our boards. Okay, so this is my first board. Okay, so we just cut out of a log now at this stage. This is my first board and it's running along. It's kind of supported underneath and it's up off the ground. And I'm going to stack boards, guys. So this is my first board. I'm going to keep the next one a little bit away from that. Okay. So we're just keeping it out this side. We're leaving the gap between them. We're leaving the space between them so that the air can circulate between. Okay. And again, you'll have one more board here. I just do 3 wide. As long as you get the theory behind this sketch doesn't need to be overpopulated, or it doesn't need to be crowded up too much. Okay. So there are our first 3 boards, guys. Once we have that done, you can see that the air is off the ground. Okay, so I'll just Highlight the ground. So it's off the ground. Okay. It's not touching off of the ground, which again is really important. All right. So there's block piers underneath it. We'll just put a few labels in these. So we'll say there's blocks underneath to keep off the ground. Okay, let's just keep it dry. You have space here, guys. I'm just going to highlight this here. So you have space between the boards so that when the air circulates and around, the air can come in underneath and it can come up through the space here. And again, it can come up through here and the air can move around all the boards. Okay, so the air can circulate really easily through those boards. Okay, I'm just going to put one more set of blocks here underneath because it needs to be supported a little bit better in the middle. Okay, so when you're sketching this thing, guys, maybe put three lines of blocks underneath. Okay, so we have 3 lines of blocks here. The next thing that we do, guys, is we want to stack this up, possibly 10, 20 rows of planks on top of each other. Okay, so we don't want to put the plank straight down on top of this plank because, again, air circulating around all the planks is so important to us. So what we do is we put a small little bit of timber down here on top of these planks. Okay, just going to sketch this in. These little bits of timber, guys, they're just there to make sure that the air circulates around on top of the boards, okay, and they're called stickers. The sketch now, guys, is not the best, unfortunately. Okay, it's not too bad. It'll do for demonstrating what I'm on about. Okay, so these are called stickers, guys. All right, I'm just going to take 3 lines here. So stickers basically are little pieces of timber which go on top of our main boards, and they're just so that the next boards which are being set down are not going in on top of these. Okay, so these are stickers. And then you're drawing your boards again. You're going to stack them up on top of this, right? So I'm just going to shorten down this board, and you're going to stack them all the way up. Okay. So once that's done, guys, the last thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that there's no rain falling down on top of these. Okay. So the very last thing that I'm going to do for this sketch is I'm going to bring up a line here straight up. Okay. I'm going to put a little post there and bring it down. We'll put a post over here as well somewhere. Okay, and we're going to run a bit of a sheeting over top of that. Okay, so basically we'll put a small bit of a roof over top of it, guys, so that whatever rain is going to fall is not going to be coming down on top of the boards. All right, so as you're doing this, guys, just have a little read through your book as well. Okay, so there's a sketch there which goes through this in detail. Okay, so if we just look at that sketch, we'll just zoom in. Okay, so what I'm talking about here, guys, is on the bottom we have our timber pier, or your block pier, sorry. Okay, that's again to keep it off the ground so that the moisture can't come from the ground and straight into the boards. Okay, once you've that done, you have stickers. They're called battens here, or stickers. Okay, they're just to allow air circulation again. Okay, you have your planks, you can see them, and the stickers to allow airflow, which we said, and there's a sloping roof to allow rainwater to run off. Okay, so it's fairly straightforward, guys. This is not used much for kind of industrial size wood seasoning because this is really slow. Okay, there's a few little bits here, guys, okay, that we just need to take account of. All right, so when we're drawing out a piece of wood, okay, and I'll just sketch something down here for you, okay. So when we're drawing out a piece of wood, all right, if this was the end of our plank of wood, okay. So when we're drawing out the wood, guys, this full length of this plank is at 50% moisture content. When we put this into natural air seasoning or into a kiln, which applies heat, this is going to dry out a lot faster than it naturally would. Okay, so when we've got something with 4 surfaces, okay, so we've got a surface here, we've got a surface on top, and we've got a surface in at the far side. So I'll just kind of hatch these out for you. We've got a surface in from this direction, and we also have the surface from underneath. Okay, so we've got 4 surfaces. When you're drying out the timber, guys, there's moisture evaporating are drying out from all these 4 surfaces. Okay, so there's moisture coming up from here, there's moisture coming out from here, there is also moisture coming out from the far side, and there's going to be some moisture coming down from above. Okay, so it's all drying through the 4 exposed surfaces, I suppose we can call them. Okay, but when it comes close to the end of the plank, okay, we have 4 surfaces that is drying out from through the full length of the plank. But when it comes close to the end of the plank, guys, there's an extra surface, and that's the very end grain of the plank. Okay, the one that I'm highlighting right now. There's one extra surface, guys, which is allowing evaporation out through it. Okay, and that's the surface here. So all of a sudden, there's now an extra surface which the moisture content is evaporating out through. All right, and what that leads to, guys, is the last 1.5 feet of the plank is going to dry out a little bit faster than the rest of the plank, because right here, we'll say back as far as here, we have 5 surfaces which is allow moisture content out through it, whereas with the rest of the plank there's only 4. Okay, so what we want to do, guys, is we want to limit the amount of moisture content drying out through the end of this plank, because we're going to end up with the end being drier than the rest. Okay, and if that's the case, we're going to have some splitting. All right, so if you think of the wood grain which is running this way, all right, if this is really dry, when we put a nail straight down to the end of this in construction or with furniture, it's going to wedge the grains of timber apart, and because it's drier than the rest, there's an increased risk of this part of the plank splitting. Okay, so what we need to do then, guys, is we need to come up with a solution so that this does not dry out quicker than the rest of the plank. Okay, and the 3 solutions are in the pictures here in the book. Okay, so the first solution is you put a really damp, wet cloth down over the ends of the planks so that there's no drying out from the end of the plank. Okay. Second alternative is we paint the end of the plank. That's to seal the surface. So when we paint it, this surface here at the very end is sealed, and there's going to be no evaporation or no moisture content lost through the end. The very last one, guys, and the one which is used very little, okay, this is kind of only used in construction for scaffolding planks. You can put a metal cleat or a metal band at the end of your board where it's nailed into both sides and it's nailed in from here, and this will just stop moisture content coming out through the end of your plank this way. These are the most common. Okay, 1 and 2 are the most common. This one here is only used for scaffolding boards. Okay, so when you see large scaffolding going up outside a new building, okay, so workers are working on scaffolding, this is mainly used for scaffolding boards. Okay, so we're just going to put a little note in here. Okay, I'm just going to try and block this off. All right, so with the seasoning, we have 3 options. Okay, option number 1 is called the sackcloth. That's to keep the cloth damp and leave it down over the end so there's no evaporation through there. The second option is in painting. So the paint just seals it up. Okay, this is the most common. When we get timber into buttercream, guys, especially hardwoods, you'll see the end of the timber painted. So I'll show you that when we get back in the class. That is the most common. And finally, the third one, which we don't really use too much and is mainly used in construction, is metal cleats. Okay, perfect. All right, so yeah, that's natural air seasoning, guys. We're just going to have one look at kiln seasoning. Okay, so kiln seasoning, guys, is basically where we use the exact same method as natural air seasoning for spacing out our board. So if we look in the end of a stack of boards which we gone through a kiln, so a kiln, guys, could be compared to like a tumble dryer or an oven. Okay, so the way that clothes are dried in the tumble dryer is that you have lots of air circulation, lots of air movement, and the air is heated. Okay, so it's the same with a kiln, guys. There's lots of air movement. Okay, the air movement is going to take the moisture content out of the boards faster, but if the air is heated, it's going to take it out, I suppose, extra fast. All right, so the oven as well, guys, is similar. An oven just circulates air at whatever temperature you put it on. Okay, so when we look in here this time, guys, we have our board spaced out, so there's space here again for air to travel up through it. And we have our stickers in between the boards. Okay, so There's stickers in between the boards, again, to allow air circulation. So there's air circulation through all of these. Okay, and the only difference with the layout for this time it's not in blocks, it's going to be on a trolley. Okay, so we'll have one more set of stickers here in the bottom, take it off the base of the trolley, and then we're just going to have a trolley with wheels on it. Okay, we'll just say we're looking at from the end, so these will be the wheels here. Okay, so basically, guys, this is like a really large room. A kiln is like a really large room, and just zoom back out. So it's like a really large room which has lots of heated air circulating, which will dry out the timber a lot faster than natural air season. Okay. Again, you need to have your stickers, you need to have your spacers. This time it's on a trolley. Okay. And the trolley just makes it a lot easier to get the timber from one end of the kiln through to the other side of the kiln. Okay. What I want you to do, guys, is I want you to go to your books. Okay, so in your books, you're going to have a sketch of the natural air seasoning, which we had a look at, and you're also going to have a sketch of the kiln seasoning. Okay, so again, this comes up in short questions and long questions. In the junior cert, it's a very popular question. Okay, so basically you have to identify different parts of a kiln, okay, and you have to be able to explain how a kiln works. Okay, so you can see at the top here we have a vent. The vent, guys, is to allow the air to just travel up here. As the air travels up through the kiln, it's gaining moisture content. So if you can imagine the air starting low, okay, the air is has very little moisture content in it. As it travels up through it, it's taking the moisture content from the wood, and it's becoming I suppose, with a higher level moisture content in it. And when it travels out through the vent, it's taking that moisture content with it. Okay. We have a fan for circulating the air. We have a roof again. We have steam jets. Okay. The reason for the steam jets is we do not want the timber to dry out too quickly. Okay. So instead of just having really, really hot air, that kind of causes a defect or a disease that's called case hardening. Okay, so if I just do a very quick sketch to explain that. So case hardening, guys, is basically if this was the end of a plank. Okay, if we dry this out too quickly, we're going to end up with a little damp, wet, high percentage of moisture content area in the middle of the plank. If that happens, guys, it's going to lead to a lot of issues down the road. This is called case hardening. So we do not want this to happen. Have we got? We'll have a look at this in the next chapter, any disease and defects. It's very similar to when you toast your bread. Okay, so when you put your bread in the toaster, it dries out the outside of the toast really quickly. So it dries out this side and this side here. But if when you break open your toast, the bread in the middle is a lot. I suppose it has more moisture content in it. It's a little bit softer and damper, but the two outsides are really dry and crusty. Okay, so it's very similar to that. So that's the reason for the steam jets. Okay, so the steam jets pump in steam, and that just prevents the case hardening. Okay, and we have timber stack, which we've been through, and we have the trolley. Okay, so all that is fairly good. It's fairly straightforward, but you need to be able to sketch this, and you need to be able to identify what the different parts of the kiln are used for. Okay. Perfect. So the last part of this, guys, is we're going to have just a quick little look about, or a quick little look at the advantages and disadvantages of natural air seasoning compared to the advantages and disadvantages of kiln air seasoning. Okay. So obviously, with construction, with wood, with anything that's going to be using up energy, cost and time are going to be a big factor in this, guys. The same as conversion. Okay. So natural air seasoning, okay, obviously because it's out, you're relying on the weather and the moisture content outside. Okay, so in the summer it's going to dry a little bit faster in the winter, but you're really dependent on the weather. Okay, so the disadvantage here for natural air seasoning is that it takes much longer. Okay, so it has a very slow drying rate. Okay, so that's a massive, massive disadvantage, guys. And this is the reason why natural air seasoning is not used a lot. Okay, we'll just focus on disadvantages while we're looking at it. The second thing, guys, you need a very large area. So you can imagine if you were doing this on a large on a large scale, if you're trying to supply timber for a lot of builders, you need a massive area, area to store all this wood while it's drying. It might take 12 months, 18 months to dry out. So you need a massive area to store it while it's drying. Okay, so there's a large area required. And also, guys, the area needs to be covered. Okay, so it needs to be covered because the rain cannot get down it. So you need massive sheds, guys, to keep the rain off this. But you'll also need the sheds to be very exposed so that the air can travel through it very easily. Okay, so it's not controlled. It's not controlled because we can't control the weather. So the rate of natural air seasoning is not controlled in the way that you could control kiln seasoning. Okay, similar to what you can do with your oven, you can adjust kiln seasoning. You know exactly when the wood is going to be seasoned for, so you can plan ahead. All right. With natural air seasoning, it's not controlled, and the max that we're going to get natural air seasoning down to, guys, is about 20% at the best to 22%. So roughly between 20 and 22% moisture content. That's the best we can do with natural air seasoning. Okay, and if we think back to what I was saying about diseases and defects, this 22% here, guys, is a bit of an issue because that's leaving the wood open to this, some diseases like wet and dry rot, things like that. Okay, whereas below 20%, if it's below 20%, you're safe. There's going to be no disease and defects hitting this. Okay, so there are the disadvantages. Obviously, there's advantages too, guys. Okay, so the biggest advantage is you do not need a kiln. Okay, you can imagine how expensive a kiln is. So there's no expensive equipment required. Okay, so any lad that cuts down a tree in the side of a road and wants it for firewood at home, he can go cut down his chainsaw, he can chop it up, and he can throw it into the shed. He does not need a kiln. That's the first advantage. Second advantage is that there's very little labor in it. Okay, so once you cut up this wood, guys, once you put it in underneath a shed, you're not going to look at that again until it's dry. It might be 12 months. So there's very little labor. Okay, so labor, guys, is a big cost when it comes to anything to do with wood. Okay, so little labor, and it's not wasteful of electricity. Okay, so we're not using any energy. So it's probably the most environmentally sustainable way to produce the wood, but it's just not economically viable. Okay, so it's not wasteful of energy. The last one, guys, because of these, because there's no expensive equipment, because there's little labor, because it's not wasteful of energy, the main one here, guys, is that it's cheap. Okay, and that's obviously a massive one. Okay, okay, lads, the last thing that we're going to look at, all right, is the advantages and disadvantages of kiln seasoning. Okay, we'll look at the advantages this time. Okay, obviously, guys, it's going to be way quicker. All right, so the speed is massive. All right, so way quicker. This is probably the most important one. Okay, the reason it's quicker, obviously, we've warmer air circulating and it's all controlled. Okay, the final moisture content can be lower. Okay, so we can bring this, guys, right down to 11% moisture content if we want. So we can cut this one here in half. In the month of April, you'll only be able to get moisture content from natural air seasoning down to 22%. So in a kiln, you can bring that right down halfway. If you're doing indoor furniture, you want that 11, so you can bring it down to 11% if you want. Okay, so you're going to have lower moisture content. It's very accurate. Okay, if you want it, guys, if you want your wood at 12, 15, or 18% moisture content, you type that into your machine, into your kiln, and it's going to bring it exactly to that. Okay, so it's exactly what the customer wants when it comes to moisture content. The last thing, guys, is there's a lot of diseases and defects which are, I suppose, as a result of wood being left at above 22% moisture content. Because it is kiln seasoning, you're going to wipe that out. Okay, so diseases and defects are minimized, let's say. All right, so there's very little disease and defects. Just zoom in here a little bit so you can see it. The disadvantages, guys, obviously, when you're talking about using large machinery, when you're talking about labor, when you're talking about heating up air, it's a massive cost. Okay, so the costly is massive, or the cost is massive. You're talking about, I suppose, energy costs, and you're also talking about very large initial layout of costs with machinery. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of extra costs when it comes to killing. Okay, it requires, I suppose, skilled people to do it. You need to know what you're at. You need to be able to work the kiln. Skilled operators, we call them. And yeah, I suppose it's not the most environmentally friendly way to do it, but it's probably the only way that you can do timber seasoning on any way of a large scale. Okay, so yeah, gents, I'll just zoom back out and I'll show you the full post once it's finished. Okay, and we'll just run through what I'm looking from you. Okay, so again, here we're looking at green timber coming from 50% moisture content down to 20% moisture content. The reason that we season timber, okay, so get it below 20% moisture content to stop it shrinking or distorting and to make it workable. Just down here, guys, we have, I suppose, the fact that we don't want the ends of the timber to dry out too quickly because it's going to lead to splitting. It's going to lead to some disease and or defects down here. So we use damp cloth over the ends. We paint the ends and seal them, or else we use metal cleats, especially for construction-related timber. The keywords, guys: relative humidity, hydroscopic material, EMC, equilibrium moisture content. We just ran through that. Advantages, disadvantages, very important that you know these tables, guys. If you can break it down to simple things and replicate this, it just knows that, or it just shows that you know what you're on about. And finally, the two sketches, guys, go to your book for these sketches because these two sketches here are absolutely terrible. First one is natural air seasoning. Just make sure you label your pieces. The second one is kiln seasoning. So I want you to sketch a kiln. Okay, so you'll find one of these in your book, or if you want, you can take a screenshot of this one here if you don't have your book. Okay, so this is what I want you to sketch out, and I want you to label the parts in this sort of trolley, the stack of timber, the roof, the vents, the fans, the steam jets, and just you need to know what each little individual element, what's the reason, or what's the reason it's there, and why it's used. Okay, so so yeah, guys, that's timber seasoning done. Best to look with it, and thanks very much.